Yeah.
Hopefully not a couple minutes. Hopefully we can.
Oh, it's going so slow today.
I know everything is so slow today. Let's see how it looks happening now. What's the
Is
best
it
kibble
happening?
right there?
Oh, wow. I'm not
Hey
getting a
guys!
notification yet.
Instant.
Whoa,
Oh.
hold on. Hey guys! Thank you so much for joining us here on this beautiful Sunday. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. We are joined by
So
one of our most favorite
excited.
people on the planet. I'm going to let Adrienne talk so I can set this up.
Yes, I'm going to vamp for a minute. You guys, we are actually so excited to be talking about kibble today. And I know for most of you guys, you know that we're big advocates of fresh food diets, that moisture is very important for our kitties. But today is going to be all about finding how to empowering ourselves to analyze the right food for our kitties. And kibble is such a big topic. We get so many questions about kibble all the time. And we are joined. I can see you. I'm sure they can see you too. We are joined today by someone who is very experienced in this field, has been a part of pet food, pet supplements, pet treats for more than 20 years. She is also one of our beautiful VIP members in our VIP group. And we had no idea you were just such a deep resource for us in so many ways when you joined our group. So we are so grateful that you are here today. Jody Richardson, thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And yes, it has been a long time in the pet industry. You see a lot of things in that time. There's a lot of misconceptions in the industry, and there's also a lot of fabrication as well.
Yeah.
Deception.
There you go. Deception. We say deception, but you're going to be nice and say fabrication. Okay.
Fabrication. Yeah. Got to be careful.
Yes. But there's,
It's all
you know,
about the
there's so
linguistics.
Jody's joining us today to kind of give us and everyone a little bit more information on, let's say specifically even how to read the ingredients, because us as pet parents, we know that it can get difficult figuring out which food is best, right? And when it comes to kibble, it's all, you know, sitting there on the side of the bag, and we're reading some stuff, and this bag is, you know, $40, and this bag is $4, and we're reading the ingredients, and we're like, what is it? What is good and what is not? And does the price tell you really what is good?
And it's interesting you say that, because a lot of people do buy on price because they want the best for their pets. And price, unfortunately, does not give you any indication of what that product is. And you have to think about who this brand you're buying is. So, for instance, if it's a multinational, it's quite possible that their margin structure is developed to give them the maximum money, and probably their distribution channels and their wholesalers and stores minimal margin structure. So the often case, the bigger the company, they're making more money, and technically their scale of economy means that production of that food should be cheaper. If it's not, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So it's worth considering that. And that's why I always talk to people about, look beyond the brand, look at the ingredients, because I've heard so many people over the years say they only want the best for their pets, and that's great. But it's not price driven, and it should never be price driven.
Right. Well, exactly. And, you know, so two things. One, the issue that many, I mean, I know that it's kind of the purpose of many pet food companies, but the issue for many of us is we look at the front of the bag. We're looking at, you know, and it says like complete and balanced, great for hairballs, great for weight management, great for urinary issues, great for inside cats, outside cats, blah, 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 like all these different things. And we're sold on that instead of reading the ingredient list. Now, I do want to say this. So it popped in my head this morning. Christopher Green with the Groomer Next Door. It was the very first podcast we've ever been interviewed for years ago. He would interview a lot of people in the industry, in PFI, which is pet food industry here. And, you know, they have an industry. And he interviewed somebody from PFI and was asking them questions about, just pet food in general. And she said, the problem is that most pet parents try to read the ingredient list, and we want you to not get so worried about the ingredients. We want you to look at the guaranteed analysis instead.
Yeah,
Now, what do
and
you
now
say to
you've made it totally confusing for most people, because they're thinking, I have no idea what I'm looking at. And really, it should be simple. First of all, we need to trust that the brand that you're looking at is actually being honest and telling you that their micro ingredients, their vitamins and minerals actually are compliant with AFCO standards. AFCO and FEDIAF seem to be the world standards according to what nutrient levels should be in the food. So if you're just looking at and trying to compare two foods, you might be looking at food A that has a moisture content of 10% and food B that has a moisture content of 12%. And that means you're going to really struggle to compare those two foods, because you have to take the moisture component away. And you can actually do this with treats, moist foods, and I believe you can do it with raw foods as well. Still take that moisture component out. And what you're left with is what I call a level playing field. So let's say, just doing the math, we've got 10% moisture in one particular food. That means you've got 90% dry matter. And that's the new number we have to work with. So if you're saying protein is 20%, you then have to work out 20 divided by 9. And that's now your new protein level as dry matter. And you can do that with fat, fiber. They don't list carbs, so you can work that out yourself.
We'll go over that too. We have to go
over
we'll
cover that. We'll cover that. So now you're left with what they class as dry matter. And so all of your measures that you've now recalculated, so you might have to do a little bit of homework. This is going to be hard to do in the supermarket aisle or in the pet food aisle, wherever you're buying it from. But you really need to re-evaluate the analysis so that you can read it as dry matter. And the problem is the AFCO standards are measured as a dry matter basis. They already take the measurements out, so the moisture component out. So you do need to take that moisture out in order to say, is my food actually compliant with AFCO standards? Or if you're looking for a particular micronutrient that you're hoping will be compliant, you can definitely do it in the same way.
And what would you define as a micronutrient?
Just anything like your vitamins and minerals, anything along those lines, because most of what you get on packs is your protein, fat, fiber, moisture. They might give you an omega-3 and 6 ratio, which isn't part of the recognized AFCO standards. So those are the basic nutrient values you get, where you might actually want something a little bit more in depth for your pet's health. So it's important then to have your dry matter basis measures. And once you've got those, you can then flip across back to your ingredients and say, okay, where does my protein come from? Is it coming from an identifiable meat source? So is it coming from just a meat meal? What's that? Because today it could be beef that your pet's allergic to, or tomorrow it could be majority chicken that your pet might be allergic to or have an intolerance to. So reading where protein comes from is really important. And a lot of companies now, because meat is so expensive, what they're doing is they're hiding the level of protein behind other ingredients like your corns, and they'll dissect corn into about 50 pieces just to make it look like it's further down the ingredient list. So you've got meat, which could or could not be the #1 ingredient, and it should be. The ingredient list should be in order of most, the highest volume in the food down to the lowest. So you look at some foods where they might have corn listed as corn, maize, corn flour, gluten flour. They're just giving about 6 or 7 different variations of corn. Well, if you add all of that up, the food possibly is corn and other stuff.
Right,
not a-
exactly.
It's not a meat or chicken product.
It's like,
it's
would you like a
corn
little,
product.
would you like a little meat with that corn?
Yeah. So what I tend to do when I look at ingredients, because they're overwhelming, and I'm going to show you a couple here that we printed off. So these two, you won't be able to read them all, but these two are actual ingredients, and I've crossed out all of the vitamins and minerals because they're just a vitamin and mineral mix. So they're all in grey. The rest are proteins and fibers, and I tend to get rid of the vitamins, then look at what the protein sources are. So in this particular one, it could be chicken, it could be brewer's rice, it could be corn gluten, ground yellow corn, because why not? Just dissect it that little bit further. And animal digest. From what animal? Again, we don't know. But anyway, they're the protein components. Then there'll be fiber components. So there'll be powdered cellulose, there might be dried tomato pomace, soy hulls, dried beet pulp. So there are a few others you might look for and really figure out which is the best. What's your pet's needs? There's not a one size fits all food. And most people, unfortunately, need to feed a dry food for whatever the case may be. We're not saying that dry food is the best option here. What we're just trying to encourage you is to, okay, sometimes you can't help it. You have to feed a dry food. It might be because you don't have storage space. You can't have, you can't handle meat. It's a fear of meat. Or you may not be able to afford it. It might be or you're not able to get it. So for all of the raw feeders, and I'm one, occasionally you might get stuck and you do need to then quickly analyze what solutions you have in the dry food segment. So it's really worth trying to look at it and have a food ready that you feel fits what your pet's needs are, because I could tell you, well, this is a good food A, but I don't know if your pet has an intolerance to beef or to chicken or can't stomach more exotic ingredients. I don't know how they respond to soy, which is in a lot of products. I would prefer soy not be in products because that tends to make animals' digestive system go a little bit haywire, or if there's too high a soy component, it does make them flatulent as well. So there's so many negative ingredients that we need to look out for, and it's
I love
it's probably easier to have a list.
Well, I love it. I love that. I love the idea of having a list. I think that for me, looking at ingredients is often overwhelming, which is why this is such an exciting topic for me, because I would be the person that walks into a place, like say we can't feed fresh next week. What are we going to feed? I would walk in and I would say, what's your best kibble? And oftentimes that really just means spending $80 on a bag versus 14, right? It's like, I'm not going to buy the cheapest one, like you said. And we have so many people come to us and say, we're feeding the best that we can. We just can't afford to put moisture in the diet or do anything like, switch it up, because they are feeding something that is considered.
Well, but then I also want to bring up the fact that there are a lot of people that are spending, in my opinion, way too much on a food, like say a prescription diet, right? Kibble, that is, they're literally buying the same thing and these the like analytics that we did prove this. They're literally spending the same amount on or they're spending almost $30 a bag for a 4-pound bag that they could be spending $4 on. And because it's, when you look at the ingredient list, it's almost exactly the same thing.
It is. That's if I didn't know the brands, and I'm not going to mention them, but if I didn't know the brands of these, I would look at it and probably think the top one, because it had a lot more protein products in there, which I've put in a red color, would probably be the better one, but it wasn't the most expensive. It was quite cheap. So
it was the least expensive cat food on the market that you can buy at any grocery store, anywhere. And it's literally the cheapest, which everybody, I mean, the average cat parent would say, I don't want to go for the cheapest. I'm going to go for what the vet recommends. And I'm going to spend a really, really lot of money, and have no idea that they're feeding almost the exact same thing, if not worse.
Exactly. And possibly came out of the same manufacturing plant too. Remember that all of these brands aren't manufacturing themselves. Very few will have their own manufacturing facility for cost purposes more than anything. It would be a multi-million-dollar project to set up a dry food manufacturing plant. So what they do is, and there's nothing wrong with this, they subcontract it out to be manufactured. And a lot of brands do that. They will take it to a specialist to develop the product, and the brand then sells it and markets it. That's not a problem as long as you're manufacturing to the standards that the brand requests. And it should be, you should be trusting the brand to know that they're following up on those procedures and making sure that that is the way things are happening. But yeah, it's sad that a lot of these, even stores, and I don't mean to put down any chain store, the staff in them work so hard, but unfortunately, sometimes they're guided to sell a brand that chain store might have an interest in as well. We have that happen here in Australia. And is that the best food? Well, we have to analyze it to check and make sure that it's suitable for our pet, because those poor staff are run off their feet and doing the best they can. So we can't criticize them for what they're referring for us to buy, but definitely look at it yourselves.
Yeah, or what they're even taught, you know. I mean, it's the same. I don't feel like the prescription diets, right, that are sold by veterinarians, I don't feel like these veterinarians are like, he, how can I get more money?
Yeah.
I'm really, you know, no, they also don't know how to read the ingredient list, or they don't.
Many,
yeah, many are just.
I had, funny you mentioned that, I had an interesting conversation a few years back here in Australia with a vet querying a product that I was representing at the time. And they asked me about, it had something to do with the level of a couple of vitamins and minerals. And I said to her, well, they do follow the AFCO standards. And she actually said to me, could you just run that acronym by me again? And she was writing it down. And I thought, you're in the industry, you should know FEDIAF, AFCO, you should know Pet Food Industry Association. There's associations all through the world, so get to know what the association is in your country.
Yeah.
But you'll probably find that foods to be what we class as complete and balanced, and I'm doing that because we've got to trust them. They have to follow the AFCO or FEDIAF standards just because they're worldwide standards. AFCO is obviously American. The FEDIAF is the European, and I believe there's another, it's not coming to mind, but there's not many. Why reinvent the wheel and have specific criteria for each country? It would be silly. So we use what they class as worldwide standards. Now, again, they're only minimums. So you're only getting, unless there's a toxicity issue, say for instance with overdosing on calcium or vitamin D or A, there would be maximums for some of those vitamins, but most of it's just minimums. And they'll say, in order for a pet to be to maintain a pet's health, these are the minimum protein levels, fat levels, etc., that you have to follow. So sometimes just meeting the AFCO standards or FEDIAF standards doesn't mean your pet's getting the best. Right. But don't also think that higher numbers mean something as well, because as we said, you have to figure out where your protein is coming from. So once we've reassessed what our new protein levels are on dry matter that we talked about, we then have to look at where that protein comes from. And if you're looking at a very high protein number compared to perhaps another food, stop and think, where is that protein coming from? Is it because there's a mountain of corn in there? Is it because they're actually using inferior meats or unnamed sources of meat? You really have to then go, right, that's protein, what ingredients in there? Highlight them, get colored highlighters, print them off and highlight your protein bits. research it, look up what is ground corn useful for in pet food. Don't go to the brand that you're looking at. Try and find that information somewhere else on the internet. It's all there. You don't need to be a food technician these days to get the information you need. So
right. Well, and
there.
I mean, to throw in there, our cats are obligate carnivores. So what that means is that the protein source that they need to thrive in life needs to be an animal source, not soy, not corn, not wheat, none of these other did I say animal protein? Animal meat. It needs to be animal meat, not these other protein sources, in order for them to live the longest, healthiest life. And what made me so upset when I did this analysis reading over these ingredients is that this prescription diet was the most expensive diet by this company that I could find. And looking at, the very first ingredient is chicken byproduct meal. And then it goes straight into all of this rice, corn gluten stuff. And it's like, this is what, veterinarians are selling. This is what, pet parents are trusting is the best thing for and breaking the bank. Sometimes taking on another job in order to be able to afford the care that they think that they're giving to their cats, and not even knowing how to read the ingredient list, or not knowing that they're feeding the same thing that they could be feeding for pennies.
Yeah. Make it a Christmas project over Christmas or the New Year period. Just print off about 3 or 4 different ingredients, copy and paste the ingredient lists, and then just use the process of elimination. Cross out all the vitamins and minerals, because often they list all of those together. And as you can see, what was a massive amount of ingredient turned out to be not much at all. So once you've gotten those out the way, it's less confronting. The next thing is to identify your proteins. What are the proteins? If you're not sure what taurine is, look it up. It's an amino acid, but look it up, and then maybe put that in a different color. And then you're left with perhaps fibers and fats. Look at where your fats are coming from. Cats don't necessarily metabolize vegetable oils very well. So why are they putting soybean oil in there when that's really just a cheap oil? It's an inferior oil. And they put everything in that possibly is a cheaper version of what they should be putting in. So they don't often put the best in as well. Another one was soy hulls. Well, soy hulls are just a byproduct of when they're making the soybean oil. It's ridiculous they're putting it in. I've seen raw foods that were manufactured using, and they name vegetables and fruits. And this particular food was very proud of showcasing the fact that they used orange in their foods as a fruit, one of the fruits. And this was for dog food, admittedly, but it was just the pulp. So they were using a byproduct of the orange juice industry. So you've got to be careful of those sorts of things too. While it sounds good and they're saying oranges, they're not using the whole orange. Yeah. They're using what's left after the human consumption industry has taken what they need. So there's all of these little catches, and you don't need to know all of the tricks. You just need to start logically and get rid of those vitamins and minerals, because we don't even know what levels most of those will be in the foods, because most foods don't mention them in their analysis. It's a secret. And most of the foods I've found would use a very similar vitamin and mineral mix anyway. Yeah. There are some cheaper ones. So if you're trying to get wheat out of your, say, out of the diet completely, be very careful, because some of those vitamin and mineral premixes are actually suspended. They have a pollard in them, and it keeps the vitamins and minerals all mixed well together. Well, pollard comes from wheat, but that's never mentioned. So I could go on. There's so many tricks.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, well, let's talk a little bit about, because somebody mentioned here in the comments, they said natural indoor cat, I think is what they said. Can you speak a little bit to the marketing behind? So moving from the back of the bag to the front of the bag, like when it comes to, they use the words natural and sometimes even organic. They use, they use a lot of words that make the pet food consumer think that this is a fantastic food.
Yeah, and they're marketing to your heart as well.
Right.
They want you to feel as though without this food, your pet now is somehow suffering because they're not getting it. It could be that they're trying to market to an indoor cat who may have a smelly litter tray. Well, it's possibly not any added ingredient that they're going to put in there to supposedly reduce the urine smell. It's possibly other ingredients that are causing the urine to smell in the first place. So it's a battle of which ingredients is going to win out. Is it the ones that they've put in to make the urine and feces smell, or is it going to be the one that they specially put in that's magically going to reduce the odor? Which ingredient is going to win at the time that they're actually using the litter tray? It's really that simple. Think about it. You don't have if you had a bag full of protein that's supposedly 90% protein from meat, that's actually in itself a little bit of a marketing trick, because they're not saying the entire bag is 90% protein source. You would think then that 10% is from something else. What they're actually saying is, that little measure of protein that might be 29%, well, 90% of that came from meat proteins. So you've got to be careful in the way they're wording things as well.
Wow.
Do you have any hard and fast rules for us 101ers? I feel like, you talked a bit at the beginning about margins and looking at how reading past kind of the glossy bag, right? I think that when you're looking at margins or when we're talking about marketing, I think that is what gets us. There are foods that I want to feed our cats because I love them like family and I want to feed them like family. And it just is, right? There's, I think for us as an example, I'm wanting to know your hard and fast rules. For us as an example, anytime that we see a commercial more than once, there's something in us that goes off that makes us recognize that they're spending a lot of the money that they could be using sourcing quality ingredients and really working on the transparency of their brand, instead putting that money into marketing. It is a
Yes.
multi-billion-dollar industry.
It
and
is.
I think it makes it so difficult for us because we do have to weed through all these things. What are some of the hard and fast rules that you use at the top analyzing?
My first thing is, if they're advertising on TV, you're right. There's millions of dollars going into that marketing budget, and good for them. They're selling enough bags to be able to warrant this, but you think that's multi-millions of dollars going into an advertising campaign, which could be a national, it could be an international campaign. So I tend to ignore brands that are advertising. I don't shop on price either, because there can be some okay foods that are acceptable that are in what people might consider the mid-range to low range. I used to dissect the whole industry into low range, mid-range and high range. And what we used to find is that foods that are low range often had a lot of unnamed meats. They might have wheat components in there, which you don't want, and a lot of unnecessary ingredients in there, colors, things like that, and fillers. Yeah. Then you get into the mid-range, which might then drop a bit of the filler problem. They might start naming the meats, and they may even some of them may even drop the wheat components as well. And some of those that are in the higher end of that mid-range might be a better option than going then into the higher scale again, in the high end, where they've got those trigger ingredients that I look for. And that's, is there a lot of corn? Is there a lot of soy? Is wheat included? This is something you have to ask the manufacturer, but what's the carrier for your vitamin and mineral mix? We know there's a vitamin and mineral mix. They're not putting in individual vitamins and minerals into their little bags and mixing them up. You have to look and figure this out. So that's why it's easy to highlight the ingredients you don't want and then stand back and look at it and say, what are the beneficial ingredients? What are the not so good ingredients, and maybe highlight some in a bright red color or whatever you want, and then highlight others in a green, which means they're okay. How many reds versus green have you got? You really need to not look at the price. And I used an example a little while ago about a bag. If you buy a Gucci bag versus a Target bag, they're going to do the same process for you through the day, but you've spent an absolute fortune on one, which you probably only use on special occasions. If you used it day to day like you did the Target bag, it's going to wear out in the same time. It's going to be a completely useless bag after you've used it probably for 6 months. So I'm not saying that food is like a bag and that the manufacturing processes are the same, but you are looking at something.
It is. Oftentimes.
Yeah. So it's an interesting to get that out of your head, that financial side of things really means very little, because I've seen a lot of high-end foods that don't really have the ingredients that I would like to feed my pet. So make sure you've got a list of what you don't want. And if you're not sure, again, get on the internet and say what ingredients should not be in pet food. Be very literal like that, because Google will answer you. Somebody else has asked the question.
You can also, just a plug here, you can also go to truthaboutpetfood.com to get a lot of information as far as, what ingredients mean what in pet food. But I do want to bring up here in our analysis, we did find a kibble food for cats that's like all life stages. And it is basically, their claim to fame is that they're not, they don't have those vitamin mixes. They use high quality, some organic ingredients. It's sourced better. It's not rendered, and they don't heat their food to, a certain degree. And the price of this food, just looking at the ingredient list, and I'll just kind of show you here, because you'll see the difference between, I'll try to hide the names, but you see the size of the ingredient list versus the size of this ingredient list. And these are, one was a prescription diet. And then this one that I'm speaking of with the short ingredient list is, if I were feeding a dry food, this is absolutely what I personally would want to go to, because number one, I can read the ingredients and I know what these ingredients are. And I'm not seeing any of the byproduct, the meals, the rice, the corn, the soy, those kind of things.
The only trouble is if they don't have a vitamin and mineral mix in there, your pet is actually going to be without, because in nature, and what we try and replicate in a raw food diet is basically giving them, yes, cats are obligate carnivores, but that just means that they need meat in every meal. It means that they must have that meat protein. But they still need other things. And there's arguments that they do need a vegetable component, because they might eat the stomach of the animal and they're getting a fiber content from there, which is true. But they also do, they'll nibble on grass and things like that. They're also eating the fur or the feathers of the animal and they're getting a fiber component there. There's a lot of things within a whole animal if the cat is eating. Say, a mouse, if they catch a mouse and that's their entire diet, they are eating the fur. As much as that disgusts us, that's what they are eating, and they're getting a lot of different nutrients from that as well. So if I'm looking at a raw food that doesn't contain evidence of a vitamin component, I would be questioning as well how they're getting that. So rotational diets often do help there.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We always preach, no matter what type of food you're feeding, if it's a kibble, if it's a canned food, if it's a raw food, freeze dried, doesn't matter. But rotating brands. you know, even if you're feeding the same type of kibble, you're only going to feed kibble. Like, don't just feed, you know, Meow Mix or Purina or Hills. Like switch it up.
Yeah, mix it up. So I would look, if that was a dry food you were talking about just before with the minimal ingredients, great that it's easy to read. But I would then question where the vitamins and minerals are coming from, because deficiencies in those can cause health issues.
Yeah. But are you saying that you don't think that we can get that our cats can get the vitamins and minerals from Whole Foods, that they can't get it from Whole Foods, that it needs to be in a synthetic form?
Definitely, if we're talking kibble, they definitely need those vitamin and mineral mixes in there. If we're talking a raw food diet, you do have to be very careful. And this is what actually Dr. Karen Becker is looking into with the dry food analysis that I'm really keen to see. She's actually analysing a lot of raw foods to make sure that they are what they say as being complete and balanced. So she's going to be analysing, I believe, all of the micronutrients and those vitamins and minerals so that we can answer that correctly. Right now, we don't have enough evidence to be able to say yes or no to that question. So we would like to think that we are. And that's why when I'm feeding my cats, I do put, we're going off dry food a little bit here, but I do put in pureed vegetables, and I'll change those vegetables each time and add that as a small component to the meat mix. And then I'll be putting, you know, sometimes I'll be feeding them a liver component or various other things. So I do add other things, but that's me adding ingredients. But I also, this is just me personally, because I'm not sure of the ingredients that are in those particular foods and if those micronutrients are there, I do add like about a tiny little handful of dry kibble that I've discovered that I like. Not me personally, but my cats enjoy it, just to ensure that they're getting the vitamins, the micronutrients. They're getting such a small amount of the food that it's not going to impact their digestive system. But some cats live on dry food quite well, and they live on it because it is a complete diet and they are getting all of those micronutrients. So there's a lot to consider, but making the decision easier for yourself as far as defining which kibble is best for your pet comes down to what do they need. If you don't know what is suitable for them, just run off a basic list of is it a specific meat that's mentioned? Is there corn? Hopefully not. Soy? Hopefully not. Wheat? Hopefully not. So eliminate those problem ingredients. You might even consider keeping out beet pulp and things like that, because not all pets are happy to digest that sort of ingredient as well. So maybe look at those and think, well, I don't really want that. I'm not looking at soybean oil because I know that's cheap. So trying to eliminate all of those from the equation, but keeping away from the most expensive as being the best for your pet, not always a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that price point is really the big thing, especially for kibble feeders, because we have so many people that come to us and they're like, we are breaking the bank, we've got this prescription diet, this is the issue, and we are, you know, it's hard to feed this. And there's a part of us that, you know, just depending on the issue, moisture is so important for our cats. And I feel like this is such a fundamental conversation to have, because if kibble is going to be a part of the diet, then what, you know, is there a way, once you're empowered enough to analyze those ingredients yourself, you're going to find out, I think, based on just this analysis, you can feed them a much cheaper food and then actually have excess amount of financial assistance to go and get to supplement in some wet food or to put some fresh
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Instead of being so scared to let go of the best kibble, to actually be able to look at that food yourself and make a much more empowered decision for your own personal cats.
Yeah,
exactly. And the other thing we haven't talked about is the carbohydrate level in a lot of foods, and
yes.
that is avoided. That is, And look, there will be a carbohydrate level in a lot of dry foods. In fact, you really can't avoid it unless, in fact, you can't avoid it.
Yeah, no.
So what you need to do, because they won't list it, because a lot of the carbohydrate levels are terribly high. So you've got the skills now to hopefully work through the analysis without looking at just numbers and not understanding them, but just calculate it yourself. And it's basically, you've got 100%, that's what you start with, and you subtract protein, fat, fiber, ash, which is the mineral component, and moisture. And what you should be left with is the carbohydrate level.
Correct.
So just remember that. So you're taking 100%, look at the analysis and say minus protein, fat, and fiber, and then ash, if they mention it, and then moisture. Now, if they don't mention the ash component, and ash is simply, just so you understand, for those that haven't heard or think ash is being put into the food, ash is just an analysis of minerals. And the term ash comes from when they analyze it back at the lab to find out what the nutrient components are. They actually burn off the protein, the fat, the moisture, the fiber, and what they're left with is the ash, which is a majority of the minerals. So that's an indication of what the mineral component of that food might be. Generally around 1 to 2%. 1.5 is normally average, 1.7. So that's what you're looking for. So if it's not there and you want to find your carbohydrate level, give them the grace of 1.5% if it's not listed. We can be generous.
Yeah, well, I mean, but the carbohydrate count is so important, I feel, for us as cat parents, especially because our cats are obligate carnivores, and they have an issue digesting a high amount of carbohydrates in their diet. And in my opinion, that's why we see so much, why the average cat parent, and we were two before as well, but we thought that, hairballs on a regular basis is normal, and cats throwing up is just what cats do, right? And I truly believe now, having learned so much, and then having gone through the switch from a kibble diet to now a species appropriate raw food, we don't see hairballs, like maybe once in a blue, and we don't have cats that just vomit, out of nowhere, like they used to on a daily basis. It was like so normal for us. But I think that's a lot attributed to the high amount of carbohydrates, because our cats, as obligate carnivores, they need probably less than 2, maybe 3, less than 3%. Let's just say 10. If you can find a bag of kibble that has less than 10%
alert the media.
Carbohydrates,
won't happen.
Right. That's the problem, is that when it comes to, and carbohydrates, as we know as humans, creates inflammation in the body. So it's creating a whole lot of other issues, not even just obesity or vomiting and hairballs, but it's also, causing long-term issues in our cats, because you can't make a kibble without a higher amount of starch.
Yeah, true. But again, it's trying to say to people, look, if that's the alternative, if you need to, then you're not going to get carbohydrates that low. And look, a majority of cats may be okay with a diet that's adding a little bit of wet food to it as well. They may be able to cope and be okay for up till 21 years of age, if you're lucky. Feeding a kibble. I look back at my parents' cats, and they always lived to 18, 19, 20. I think the oldest was 21, and they were kibble fed. I'd die right now if that was the case. But kibble has changed a lot over the years, and they've become very clever with how they add ingredients that are cheaper for the manufacturing process, and look good on paper, but don't necessarily translate well to our pet's digestive system. So be thoughtful about the ingredients is probably the biggest outtake I can give you, to just watch what your list is of I don't want in there. And then take the brand away, take all the pretty packaging, take it all away and just look at the two side by side and say, well, okay, I've learned now how to compare them just in case the moisture levels are different. I've taken, you know, the 10% moisture component out and I've recalculated it to dry matter. I'm now looking at what are the protein components out of that food. And you'll be surprised how quickly, once you start looking at these things, how quickly you can actually start to see the difference on the supermarket shelf or at the pet food aisle. You'll see the difference yourself without having to take it home and analysing it or downloading it from the internet. You'll just start to see the trigger ingredients and figure it out there. So it's valuable to try and work through the exercise and ask questions if you're not sure. This is not something you just wake up knowing how to do. You need to be taught and you also need to practice.
That's the best advice because it is, I mean, I've for the majority of my adult life, I've always had a J in my life. So I make her do all the small print. But
you
it
know
is
what?
really
I mean,
empowering.
Yeah. And a lot of how I learned was just like that, doing a quick lookup on what exactly
what is this
meat meal? What does that mean? And what does chicken byproduct? What is a byproduct versus chicken? Like, what is this? What does all of these like ingredients mean so that I could better make decisions for our cats as well?
Yep.
Jody, can I ask, are you comfortable if we open up for a couple questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So while you guys are thinking, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. But I do have a question because this always fascinates me, and I'm sure there's a really easy answer. What is your personal idea of why they do not list carbs, knowing how important carbs are to humans, right? Knowing how detrimental they can be to our pets. Why is that not considered required on their guaranteed analysis on any food?
There's two reasons. The first one is that it's not a requirement of AFCO standards. So if it's not there, why do we have to put it? That's a pretty basic.
I don't understand that part.
Yeah. So AFCO doesn't list it, don't have to list it, don't have to care about it. The other is that they know it will be high. It will be a high measure. So why put something that's going to highlight the problem with your food? So there's two issues. One, we don't have to because it's not in the AFCO standards. And why should we? Because it's going to be highlighting our problem. And our problem is we've got the wrong mix of ingredients in there.
Well, and I think that's also a good reminder for the plug on truthaboutpetfood.com, because I think we want to make sure that everything is AFCO is up to that standard, but there is so much that goes into AFCO regulations. And I feel like that's a whole new bag of beans. But at the same time, it's really
bag of beans
or a can of worms.
Okay. I think
it's Truth About Pet Food is really a great place to go to if you really do want to start digging in a little bit more, because to me, or any, I think, health conscious pet parent, it's like, why wouldn't AFCO require that, right? If you've got a obese or a diabetic cat, like, I want to know what the carbs are. I want to know what's going on.
And Susan Thixton, the owner of Truth About Pet Food, has been actually advocating for us at AFCO meetings every year to encourage the change in the rules of AFCO, but also encourage pet food companies to start listing that, so that but like you said, if it's not required, you're not going to see it. So
exactly.
I heard, I haven't seen them, but I have heard that a few pet food companies are starting to make that change, and they do want to list it on the bags. So if you see it, then you know already, if you have a bag of kibble and the carbs are listed, then you can already start to trust. That's like a number one, like, oh my God, they're going to tell me this.
That would be a game changer.
Yeah, that would be like, I think I'm going to call this company. I think I'm going to look at the other ingredients, because this is, somebody's
and I think it should be. It's a very important part of a food, or to look at how low that carb level can get. And while it's not ideal with kibble, you should be able to get it lower than what the average is. And I think the average is about 45 to 50, if not sometimes 60% carbs. It's crazy. So look it up, work it out. It's easy to work out. It's just a little bit of math, and it's not working out division or multiplication. It's just subtraction.
Yeah. It's not too
Keep
much.
it simple.
You can just pull up your phone and do the math. So Marilyn said, Jody, do you feed a minced veggie mix to your cats? Is that what you said?
I do make my own. So I do minced kangaroo mainly because we're lucky to be in Australia. I do add other minced meats every now and then, but they digest that one particularly well. And then I puree, I'll get one of those multi-bags of salad, which might have spinach leaves, carrots, little shreds of beetroot, those sorts of things. And I'll shred one of those 500-gram bags, sorry, I'm talking grams, to 10 kilos of kangaroo mince. And then as I'm serving it up, I'll also cut up a couple of chicken hearts and chicken liver to add to that. And then I use some really good products that I've just recently discovered from the two crazy cat ladies.
That was smooth.
Good.
I heard they rebranded with the help of.
I heard that. It's actually Feline Essentials. Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you guys watching that don't know, Jody was a huge help to us with that recent adventure.
It was fun. We had
that was a very nice plug. Thank you.
Okay, so everybody's talking to each other, so I don't know whose questions.
I know.
I want to know what Kibble Jae was referring to on her paper that was good. Okay, so yeah, so
we weren't going to mention
we decided we weren't going to mention brands, but I guess I can mention this one because I'm not saying something negative about the brand. So this brand is called Carnivore. The number 4, and it's a it's actually, this is a dehydrated dry cat food. So it's basically one that excuse me, that they say, you know, it's not cooked as high as at high a temperature as than most kibbles, right? So one of the things about the majority of kibble foods or processed food in general is that it has to be, Becky has a question too, don't lose that one, is that it has to be heated to a certain degree for many reasons. One, to make it dry, right, into a little thing, but also because of the sourcing of many of the ingredients. So when they're sourcing from, like when my dad worked for a pet food company that was a rendering plant, they got a lot of their meat from these big companies that we're talking about now, got a lot of their meat from roadkill, right? So it was the meat meal that was coming from the side of the road. And so they weren't sure of the amount of disease that might've been in that meat or the type of, you know, and the other ingredients as well. It just wasn't sourced well. So they had to heat it to a very high degree in order to kill all of the rot. Yeah. But they also kill all of the nutrients in the food when they heat to that degree. So, you know, it's kind of like
which actually brings me to an interesting ingredient that we saw, just on a side note, lactic acid, which is added to very, very premium type prescription diets. And that actually helps prevent salmonella. And now you would think that's lovely. That's really great to add lactic acid. Isn't that what pregnant women need? Blah, blah, blah. No, it prevents salmonella. That's the purpose of it going in there. So if they need to add that, along with other preservatives, just raises the question.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I lost it. No, here it is. Becky said,
I may have missed it, but you went past it.
Oh, and Becky, this was my fault. At the top of this interview, I really didn't give you a good chance to do a thorough introduction. We just jumped in. But Becky,
hi, I'm Jody.
Hello.
She said, but I'd like to know what Jody does professionally in the pet food area.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Can you just do a little intro for
Yes.
yourself? After?
I'm sales and marketing manager for a multinational company at the moment. They're a lovely company. And I've been training my reps for years with this company and previous companies how to basically talk the talk at store level. And what I try and encourage reps to do is to know as much as they can about the industry and how to analyze different foods, how to teach the stores how to do this, because a lot of stores don't know this as well. So you then have more information coming from whatever brand I'm working for, and flowing through the reps who are empowered with information, and then at store level. So that's what my passion really is, to pass on information and ensure that they are capable of training the stores, training the people who are speaking directly to the general public.
Yeah, I know you advocate for transparency when it comes to the pet food industry too, which is something we
Yes,
absolutely
definitely.
love. Yeah.
Definitely.
Catherine has a question for you. Your neighbor there,
Your mate,
and
your
and
mate there
your
in
mate there in
Australia.
Australia.
My neighbour, who's about a 12-hour flight, I think we worked out, a couple of flights away. It's close.
It's a big country there. Can Jody please tell me the Kibble one she uses to ensure her babies get the mineral mix?
Well, the one at the moment that I'm using, I don't want to, didn't want to name it because I don't want people to think that I'm putting my hand up to say this is great, because there can be problems with all types of kibble.
Yes.
But one of the brands I'm using at the moment is Taste of the Wild, which has questionable issues at certain times. However, there are also similar issues across the board with different kibbles as well. Right. There's a couple here in Australia that I would also say give a tick to, and that would be Meals for Mutts at the moment. That's a good one to look at, which Catherine will be able to get hold of. There's also, just trying to think, another brand, which is a tiny one called Hypro. That's another product that you could probably look at. I've been told by another colleague within the industry that even Costco has a really good quality food, and she's quite happy to feed that. I haven't looked at it. I don't shop at Costco. Sorry, Costco. But apparently that's a good one. But me saying that doesn't mean that's suitable for your pets. So please shop around, because that's the one I'm happy to give at the moment. It doesn't mean that it's forever, because I might change and have heard something within the industry that I'm not happy with, and in a couple of weeks I might change. So don't take it as do your own research is what I'm hoping everybody gets out of this.
Yeah, out of the entire thing, because it is true. We get the question all the time, what food do you recommend? What foods do you recommend? And it's like, well, I can only recommend like the foods that we feed right now, or that we have recently fed, or that we know in the industry, that we can recommend. But even the food that we feed the most and that we recommend the most right now can change at any point. We've been in the industry ourselves for 15 years, and we have seen great companies that started out with a great mission and just a family-owned business kind of thing, really wanting to help change the lives of pets, that at some point they sell out, or they change their ingredient list, or they do whatever they have to do to lower the quality and increase the profit.
It's generally that causes problems within a food as well, because they're changing it up and the ingredients are changing. Also, be very careful what you hear in the media. Like, don't crucify a brand because they've been honest and said they've had a recall. Be very careful of that, because all that means is another 2 to 10 brands didn't, and just let things go through to the consumer and just ignored any backlash. And you think that might not happen, but I've seen it happen, and I've unfortunately witnessed what's the good term, head in the sand mentality. Don't look at it and it'll go away. But don't crucify a brand just because they've been honest and said, we're not happy, we've tested a product, or we've had an issue. It can happen in human foods as well. So things happen, and if a brand is actually being honest about it, try and be a little bit more sympathetic to that and know that the next batches they're obviously going to be extremely careful with. Things happen.
Yeah, things always. Anytime you mix, somebody said to me one time, anytime you mix food and machinery, then anything, then anything
with humans, yeah.
anything can happen.
Yeah.
You never know. So Pam said, Jody, I find that legumes and dry food causes lots of GI upsets in cats. Pet food manufacturers artificially inflate the protein percent with products.
Correct. That's another one. Exactly.
That's a good point.
And that's another ingredient on the not so good list, because you're right. There are too many legumes going through that perhaps shouldn't be, because they're novel ingredients. So you'll see that chia seeds went through for a while and they're great, but have they been tested thoroughly for pets' digestive system? Just because they're great for ours and they were used as ancient grains back with the Aztecs doesn't necessarily mean that our pets are going to have long-term benefits from it until you see studies from it. Maybe try and avoid those novel ingredients as well. But yeah, legumes definitely another problem one that I would avoid as well.
Okay, so Catherine said there are some vitamin and mineral supplements for pet owners that raw feed. So you add them to your own meat and livers, etc. What are your thoughts on these?
As long as they're natural and go back to that carrier component, that every vitamin and mineral mix needs a carrier. And what that does is holds its form and makes sure that the vitamins are mixed well, because you might have a huge amount of one vitamin and a tiny little sprinkle of another. Well, how do you make sure that is blended and stays blended and doesn't separate? So they use a carrier in there. And unfortunately, a lot of the cheaper vitamin and mineral mixes use pollard as the carrier. So pollard comes from wheat. So if you're trying to avoid wheat, it may not be an issue for most pets, but if your pet is particularly sensitive to wheat, then you need to know. You need to know that that's the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's nothing wrong with the vitamin supplements, the natural ones. Great. Yep. Use them.
So let me give my take on that, because we have a couple companies here that we've actually recommended, we've used, and we've made videos on. But so, I think it was Dr. Becker. It was Dr. Becker recently brought up the point of, if we are, when you're making a pet food, the vitamin mineral count is going to be different depending on the other ingredients that you're using, right? So so it can't all be the same unless we're doing the same thing, right? So if we're feeding chicken, then the vitamin mineral count needs to be a little different from if we're feeding lamb with that vitamin mineral, because this nutrient, this source of protein is going to have a different nutrient profile than this source of protein. So if we're only feeding this same bag of vitamin and minerals in with different types of meat, then over time there's going to be a deficiency. So we don't want to do just that.
Possible. Yeah, it's possible. But again, it's something that we actually don't quite understand yet, because the raw foods at the moment don't have that measure behind them. So you're relying on the manufacturer for your vitamin and mineral mix to ensure that they're not nudging the recommended serving levels to the absolute max, which they won't be. If they're going by minimums, which I guarantee that they are going by minimums, they may have increased the serving sizes slightly, but they're also very concerned about what products you're actually adding these vitamin and mineral mixes in to ensure you don't exceed certain levels. So I don't believe feeding a raw food diet and adding a reputable supplement would exceed those micronutrient levels, because they too, you're adding it to a food and they're feeding something. You're either feeding a dry food and adding a supplement, or a wet food adding a supplement that already have all of those measures in place, or you're making your own raw food, adding a reputable supplement. It won't exceed the micro levels unless you give copious amounts. So as long as you follow the instructions, I'm pretty confident you'll get well below those levels.
Yeah, and I do think that's an important thing or was to me when we were learning about this, is that it is possible to overdose
Yeah,
on certain
yeah,
Vitamins.
vitamins and nutrients. But I think too with us, it's like for me, since I love playing with raw food so much, and the liver in particular. I saw Israel commented earlier about the liver. Um, for me, it was really exciting to be like, okay, here's actually some ground meat, whatever, that's not too, like, I want to do this recipe forever. And here's our little packet of stuff that we can put in. And now it's all balanced. I think the danger is in, like Jay was saying earlier, not feeding variety. Just saying that this is the recipe that I know how to make, that I'm going to stick with, and this is what my cats are going to eat for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
That I think is where you'll find deficiencies in certain things, only using one nutritional makeup of a protein
Or what?
and
Yeah.
only using one packet of supplements.
yeah. So you're not going to add your own vitamin D and hope that that's right. You're going to add what somebody else has done all the hard yards, worked it all out, what the balances should be, and you're adding that to your food and enhancing the food rather than tipping it over the line. So any reputable natural vitamin and mineral mix, I don't see a problem with, as long as you follow the guidelines.
Yeah, follow the
Well
guidelines.
said.
I
Well
saw
said.
I lost it, but I think it was Angela said something about grain free. Can there be rice in grain free foods?
So most grain-free foods are without. It's a look. It's a bit of a mixed bag, that one, because
No pun intended.
no pun intended, because there's issues now with the alternative ingredients that they're putting in to replace the grains. So while grain is taken out, I don't believe a grain-free diet is the answer, only because they start supplementing what was taken out with things like vegetable protein. So you'll see a lot of peas in there, split peas. You'll see more corn. You'll see legumes. You'll see all of these funky ingredients coming in, which again cause issues. So the lack of grain is now the problem that grain may have caused, if you know what that problem was, is now being replaced by inferior ingredients. I'll tell you, there was an analysis, just to give you a little bit of context in that, where replacing ingredients don't actually do give you the result that you're hoping for. Back, I think it was in the 70s, and I hope I've got the institution right. The institution, I think it was the Ohio State University, did a study years ago with gorillas in captivity, because gorillas were dying of heart disease at a certain age, but not in the wild. And they couldn't understand it, because they had created a fabulous meal in this form of I think it was in tablet form, I could be wrong, but they had on paper the most ideal diet you could give a gorilla, fabulous diet, and yet they were still dying in the wild. So what they did, they got a little group of scientists, they loved their little expeditions, and off they went to where the gorillas, probably in the mist somewhere, where they lived, back in the wild, and they observed what they ate. And what they found is they foraged. They had certain plant matter that they were eating that wasn't present in their current environment. So there were certain plants and a variety of plants that they were eating. So they were grazing rather than eating once a day or twice a day. They were grazing constantly through the day. They also had plants that they required for the protein that was suitable for their bodies. And they leaned then towards a more natural diet and brought plants back from their traditional homes and fed them, and found that they no longer had that heart disease issue. Now, if you look at studies now with, in particular with dogs, feeding grain-free diets, the risk of heart disease is now increasing again for them, because the lack of grain has now been replaced by ingredients that their bodies can't handle in over a long period of time, which are the peas and the corn. And they might be okay in small doses, but in larger doses and for a consistently long period of time, certain breeds have more issue with these. And there's multiple studies that you can have a look on online that will explain that. But I think the gorilla analogy really drives home that it can happen to any species. If you're on paper, it looks fabulous. And this is what happens with many commercial foods. On paper, they look fabulous. But when you break it down, it's not right. And it's not suitable or species appropriate, as people like to say, for our cats and dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Debbie just said, I just feed the best can and kibble I can afford, and that's the best I can do. And that's
Debbie,
a
I
very
love you.
great point. We can all like only do our best, but that's kind of why actually it is the reason why we wanted to talk with you today, Jody, is because we want to better empower pet parents to understand what is the best that we can do, right? And that it's
Could
not
be a lot cheaper
it
than
could
what
be
we're
a lot
thinking.
cheaper than what we might be able to purchase some better things for a much lesser price if we actually read the ingredients and better understand the ingredients that we're feeding our
And
kids.
the funny thing is, if you go through the talk about the ingredients, go through the analysis as we've just described, that might be an ideal food. Just because it's mid-range doesn't mean it's not okay.
Right. Yeah. Or if you,
that.
I mean, or like in this ingredient list, if you're feeding the bag that cost, $80 a bag, and then you look at the one that would cost you the same would cost you $16 and realize that it's almost the exact same thing.
Yeah. The only difference that dragged that poor cheaper one down was the addition of colors, that they'd added colors.
Yes.
That's the only, it completely bottomed out as soon as I got to the colors. And I thought that's almost the only difference between the two. One doesn't have added colors. The other one, unfortunately, did. But they were very similar apart from that.
Well, and that's a very good point. I do want to let our listeners or viewers know that when you see things like red 4, yellow 5, yellow 6, blue 2, these kind of ingredients are dyes. They're color dyes, and they have been directly linked to cancer and different diseases in animals. So we do want to stay away. The only reason that any pet food company adds dyes into their food is to trick the person, the human. Our cats do not care what color their food is.
Oh, it's a real pea. It's a bean.
Right. Yeah. So
look at all the meaty morsels, and they show all the different.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll tell you something too, going back to the soy issue. And again, this is probably more dog related because it's more obvious, but it does affect cats in the same way, other soy products. And there is a product that is often used called TVP, which is textured vegetable protein. It's soy. And it starts out as looking like a dehydrated piece of kibble, almost like a scoria rock. You know, the type of scoria that you would get. I think that's how you pronounce it in the UK, in the USA. But it's, the tennis courts, the red dirt that you get on tennis courts, that's scoria. And the scoria rock is what this textured vegetable protein will look like. Now, they'll put a dye in it to make it look like a beef or a lamb, or a very pale dye to make it look like a chicken. And they rehydrate it so that it looks like what they call, the old meaty chunks in canned foods.
Yeah. But
they're not. They're soy. And that's why a lot of dogs have, when they're eating canned foods that are really, really cheap, those ones, they're eating a lot of soy products. Their body can't actually deal with it. They become very flatulent. They have a lot of stomach aches. They never get full. It goes through them because it's too active through their lower intestine, and it just zooms through their digestive system too quickly, and they're not getting the nutrients. You'll find with a lot of those products too, is you have to feed probably 4 times as much to get the calories up and to get the nutrients than you would a better quality product. And that's something else you should compare to, is how much are you feeding? If you have to feed 4 cups of one particular food versus 1 cup, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So you can also look at that.
Okay, so this might
We
be
are
the
running so low on
yes,
time,
we
just
are
FYI.
running low on time.
But-
I'll
really
keep my
low on
mouth shut.
time, but this might be the one
Jody, I love you
reason.
for hanging
This
with
might
us
be
so
the one
long.
reason why we are live today and talking, because Myrna has a question. She said, "I feed Wiley Kitty a diet of Hills dry food because he has thyroid problems. It costs me $65 per 8.5 pounds of bag. Does it sound proper? What say you, Jody?"
I don't agree with that, because I've seen a lot of natural therapists who can actually deal with that in a much better way than the diet. The diet is possibly helping very, very short term, but it's not going to be a long-term fix. And I would say it's possibly enhancing the problem. Then you've got to add medicine on top of that. And then you've got this vicious cycle happening. So what I would strongly suggest is reassessing that and seeing how you can fix it with a professional that actually does lean a little bit towards the natural therapies, like a naturopath. I think there's a fabulous one called Pam from Perfectly Holistic. There's another dig.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's
Another
so true. And
yeah, so I've heard a lot of pets that are suffering with thyroid issues, with a lot of immune system issues, and one of the first things to correct is the diet away from a lot of these kibble foods as well. So
And the prescription, I just want to throw out there that prescription diet does not mean that there's any medication in there, Myrna. In fact, there is no medicine in a prescription diet. The Hills actually trademarked the term prescription diet in order to be able to market and to market to veterinarians and to market to consumers. So a lot of us as pet food consumers, we just think, because prescription, the only thing we've ever heard is a prescription is some medicine. We tend to think that there is some medicine within this diet. And when in fact there's never medication in these diets. So I think this is a great ending, because this is kind of where we started, which is we can spend a whole lot of money on these like the one that I'm looking at, the metabolic weight management. And you look at the ingredients, and if you read the ingredients and then compare it with other foods on the market, you might find that that the prescription food that you think is really helping your cat and that is almost breaking the bank you could actually find a much better food, and maybe even add in supplementation that could really help to support that thyroid instead of going with that really expensive crap.
And it's probably the medication that's working for them. I don't believe the food's doing anything. And somebody that I used to work with said, if it's not working, if it's taking months to fix, it's probably not the right solution. So you need to rethink it. If you're not seeing a result within a month, I would rethink how that solution is going. Find a better one. Bless you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
That's a really good reminder, though, because I think that there's so many people that are on this brand and it's been years, or whatever the food is, they are feeding it for years and years. They're breaking their bank, and the issue, they're just so scared of the issue that they're probably already cyclically still dealing with.
Yeah.
And it's
the unknown. If the doctor was to say to you, gosh, you've got a really bad health issue here and it could lead to your demise, bless you, you really need to have a think and strictly follow this diet here. And you would never stray from that for fear of dropping off the perch. So
Exactly.
Well, and it's that fear tactic too. I know that we probably missed a number of comments because we're trying to do the Zoom and the live at the same time, but as someone mentioned, maybe it was Tabitha, this is a great reminder as well, just to watch the documentary Pet Fooled. I think that that's an eye opener for a lot of people.
It is.
Pet Fooled is it's an eye opener.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of information. We're very lucky that the internet has opened up our world. If you don't know something, it's easy. Just ask things very literally and you'll come across these fabulous websites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that are so helpful, really game changers,
Yeah.
not just for our own illumination, but for the lives of our
Of
cats.
our
And it makes such a
kitties,
big
yeah.
difference.
Okay, so we have to wrap up because we are supposed to be live in 7 minutes on our back here again.
We might be a little bit late.
Yeah, we're going to be,
setup.
we will be late because we have to move our setup. But Jody, thank you so much. You
grateful
are,
for you.
Pleasure.
I mean, not just to the world, the pet consumer world, but to us specifically, you are just an
game
angel,
changer.
an angel.
Thank
and,
you. Thank you.
And so thank you so much for all of your information. And
Thank you for spending a big part of your Monday. It's
Yeah.
still Sunday over here. A big part of your Monday morning with us. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
I know we could talk on for hours.
I
but-
know.
But I know you have to get back to work and we got to get back to work and we love you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you
Take
to
us.
care,
everyone
everyone.
who joined us.
Yeah, and thank you guys.
Thank
We
you.
will be live here for Cat Tip Review in probably about
15
15
to
20 minutes, right back here on our page in a different space. We love you guys. Mwah. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you again, Jody. Love y'all.
Bye.
We'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.